What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench Podcast Network and channel, giving a shout out to the rest of the crew: Shad, Kelvin, Jermaine, KB Film Room, Big Dog Talk Sports. That's right, that's right. And for everyone who's tuning in, we thank you for supporting Behind the Bench and becoming a subscriber and helping to make this show the best that it can be. Most indeed, most indeed. Hey, NBA, right? NBA playoffs is underway. First round action. And now we are about to enjoy the second round of the NBA playoffs, the conference semifinals. And these are the qualifying teams in the Western Conference: Denver Nuggets, Minnesota Timberwolves, Dallas Mavericks, Oklahoma City Thunder. In the Eastern Conference, Boston Celtics, Cleveland Cavaliers, New York Knicks, Indiana Pacers. And there is not one veteran team that advanced out of the first round who qualified for the playoffs. It's a beautiful thing, and it's not an accident. It's not a coincidence. So I asked this question: is the NBA Superteam era coming to an end? Well, technically, it ran its course after the 2019-2020 season. Think about it. When was the last so-called super team victorious and won a championship? Let's go back now. Let's see. 2018, if people want to call the Golden State Warriors a super team that featured Kevin Durant, prime Kevin Durant, okay. But the way I see that Golden State team is they started from scratch. Let's go back. They drafted Steph Curry in 2009. He was an unheralded player entering the pros. And then they drafted Klay Thompson out of the University of Washington. Then they drafted Draymond Green in the second round out of Michigan State, playing for Tom Izzo. And they drafted Harrison Barnes. I believe Harrison Barnes was drafted out of the University of Kansas. That was the foundational players. And then they added complementary talent such as Andre Iguodala and Andre Barbosa, Maurice Spates, right? And Andrew Bogut. So they had won a championship before they acquired Kevin Durant. And the main reason that made it possible for them to sign Kevin Durant as a free agent was during that same offseason in 2016, the new TV deal kicked in for the NBA, which allowed the salary cap for all 30 teams to increase. That put them in position to sign Kevin Durant. So it was like an anomaly. The stars line up for that one, like, rare opportunity to make such a move. Otherwise, they would not have been able to do it. But nonetheless, if they want to call that Golden State team of 2017, 2018, the Super Squad, so be it, But if that's the case, that's the last. No, I take that back. I take that back. In 2019, the Toronto Raptors, a non-super team, won the title. Kawhi Leonard leading the way. And then LeBron James, after forcing the issue to get Anthony Davis. And then they had a lot of veteran players on their team who were once like franchise level or the best of their position, joining alongside of him. Dwight Howard, Rajon Rondo, and the like. So theoretically, that team was built as a super team. But since then, no super team has won. Milwaukee Bucks won in 2021, led by Giannis Antetokounmpo. Steph Curry led the Golden State Warriors to the championship in 2022, and then last year, Nikola Jokic led the way in leading Denver to his first ever title in 2023. And there's not going to be a super team whoever wins the championship this year, whether Denver repeats or a new champion is crowned. And I think it's awesome. But something hit me about this era and how it led every aspect of basketball, not to evolve, but devolve. And it's just a quick take. And for whoever's tuning in, I would like your input on this. You can post and just let us know what you think about this. Now, from observation over these past 15 years, and ever since this playoff started, like there's so many thoughts that's running in the mind that I have to share it. And when you really look at the constructs of the NBA super team, and this Phoenix Sun team is not the only organization that attempted to create a super team to win in the short term, in the immediate term. But nonetheless, they lost in the first round in Minnesota and got swept 4-0. And both LA teams, the Lakers and the Clippers, they lost in the playoffs as well. The Lakers lost in 5 games to the Denver Nuggets. The Clippers lost in 6 games to the Dallas Mavericks. So the way I look at it, both LA teams could be struggling for a long time. Once they finally break their current configuration or their current roster up, they're going to be suffering for a long time. As well as the Suns. Philadelphia's at a crossroads with Joel Embiid in his prime. They got eliminated in the first round. And Milwaukee Bucks, they have to start searching for answers too. Now the thing about it is, I will always appreciate Giannis and what he did in staying in Milwaukee, because influential voices was trying to lead him to sign elsewhere and form another super team. And actually, Giannis should go down in history as a luminary of this sport, because I believe he set the tone for this decade as a superstar willing to stay and represent the organization who drafted him and lead them to the promised land. It can be done. It can be done. Is it a challenge? Yes, it is. But the rewards of doing that the right way, so you get the respect of basketball fans who truly love competition. And Nikola Jokic proved it last year, and he got the respect of the basketball world. And Steph Curry did it for Golden State after they, retooled, and then within 2 years, returned back to the top of the basketball world. So it can be done. And when you do it the right way, you will get appreciated. Just like Dirk Nowitzki did it in 2011. He beat a super team, and for him to finally conquer that hurdle and win a championship for the city of Dallas, that was awesome to see. Stuff like that give you chills. But the super team is flawed in so many ways. This is just a quick synopsis. I don't want to, drag this on too long, but this is something that just, popped on in my mind within the past day or so. See, the super team let any organization that was led to try to create a super team. In order to do it, first of all, you really have to set aside logic, because you're going to throw all your chips in the middle of the table. Then you're going to start making moves that are against your organization's best interest long term. That's the second thing. But this is the most glaring difference between a super team. And this is how you know when they try to tag those great teams of the past and label them and identify them as super teams, it's false. It's not true. Now, they played super, but they all started from scratch. Any team that became a dynasty started from scratch. From the 60s Celtics to the 70s Knicks. And they won 2 championships in the early 70s, but they did not dominate the whole decade. But they did win 2 championships. So therefore, they go down in history. Showtime Lakers, the 80s Celtics with Bird, Mikhail Parrish, the Bad Boy Pistons, the Chicago Bulls, Kobe, Shaq Lakers. Those dynamics, those teams were built from scratch. No team that I just mentioned mortgaged away their future to win. They built. to reach the top of the mountain. Or teams that had that all-time single season championship run, like the '83 Sixers. They had been building their team up since they brought in Dr. J and Bobby Jones from the ABA after the ABA disbanded. And then after reaching the finals, in 1980 and 1982, they was one piece away. They needed a center to compete against Kareem in the finals, and they brought in Moses Malone. And as Moses said, I'm going to lead you to the promised land, 4-4-4. They built up to that point. So a super team operates backwards. It operates in reverse. Whereas a normal team build up, whether you win a championship or not, the primary tool or the primary aspect of team building is through the draft. And then once you get from point A to point B to say, okay, now, we're a 500 team. Okay, now we got to win a record. Now we've made the playoffs. Okay, now we become a contender. And at that point, if you're one step away, then you may make a key trade, right? You make a key trade. And when free agency became constant, then you may sign a free agent to keep your run going. Like if you look at even the bad, like the Chicago Bulls in the '90s, they didn't bring in a lot of free agents doing a championship run. They only brought free agents in when Michael Jordan retired the first time. But with him in the fold, they mainly built through the draft and then really limited trades. Because I remember when they traded for Bill Cartwright in '89. After that, it still took an additional 2 years before they, won their first championship with Bill Cartwright as their starting center. So it was the draft, make a key trade, and then sign a free agent to keep your run going. Well, the super team, the operation goes in reverse. The modus operandi, or the MO. You use free agency as the primary element to build that team up. Then you make a series of trades, and then free agency trades, and then drafting is the last stage or the least sought after means. So what happens is when the super team was born in 2010, it de-emphasized the focus on developing young players, especially during the one and done era. So you go from, because think about it. No sports league could exist without the draft. That's the first primary tool of team building. You drafting guys either out of college, or one time they were drafting players out of high school. And it goes the same in football and baseball. You're drafting young men. You don't start off by drafting 30-some-year-olds and then wind up, the last stage of a team build draft. No, you draft, you make a key trade, and then free agency keeps it going. Well, the super team operate in reverse. So what happened was the super team, the dysfunction of building a super team, it led organizations who were led to embrace that model to de-emphasize and devalue young players, to where young players became no more than pawns or assets, right? To bring in more stars. Or you clear out your roster to create the cap space needed to bring in multiple stars, or superstars, franchise players. You see? So it was flawed from get-go. So what happened was, when the super team hit, especially when you got 3 franchise players in the same conference, there was already the lesser of the two, and they combined, or as they say, joined forces, well, you eliminated essentially two franchises from the playoff mix, right? And then to keep it going, you either letting young players go to create cap space to bring in high level veteran players, or you trade them off to bring in such players. So 4 years later, for the first time in NBA history, we saw a player drafted with the #1 pick traded for a superstar practically right after he was drafted by the team in Andrew Wiggins. So that's why I knew when that dude came to the Lakers and he was brought to the Lakers, I knew it was going to happen to our young core. They was all going to be wiped out. And they was wiped out in record time. The last one that was true young core member that was left standing was Kyle Kuzma. And they couldn't trade him the way they wanted to because he was still playing under his rookie scale. As soon as he signed, eligible to sign that extension, and once he signed it, he was traded to the Washington Wizards. That's how bad the process of building a super team is. Everything gets devalued until the rubber hits the road, or as they say, everything starts hitting the fan. And right now, everything's starting to hit the fan now, because what teams start to understand is, initially, teams try to duplicate or replicate what was being done in Miami by trying to create their own super team. The problem was, think about it. You got 30 teams, right? And there's only so many players in the league that's considered top 10, right? Superstars. Well, if you take 3 of those players in a prime and they join forces, well, now you're manipulating the scene and competition becomes devalued. So you know how people, try to attack the 90s and say the 90s was watered down because of expansion? No, actually, expansion is a sign that the league is growing. And those expansion teams that didn't start during Jordan's era in the 90s, it actually started in the late 80s before the Pistons won their first title, the Bad Boy Pistons. Well, those expansion teams became playoff level teams within 3 years on average, where most of the top collegiate players entering the NBA were drafted by those teams. And those expansion teams became just as talented and surpassed the established franchises of the 80s, Celtics, Lakers, and Pistons. The league was just as competitive, but you had different teams that rose to the top of the standings to go up against Chicago Bulls during their championship runs. So what I'm trying to say is everything is being trying to describe the so-called expansion era, which every decade from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s featured teams that were added to the NBA as expansion. But what I'm trying to get at is the super team disrupts everything that is contingent on real team building. That's why so much flux. That's why there's so much player turnover, because the model is not sustainable. You may get that advantage for a year or two, but by year 3, you're going to start seeing the cracks. And by year 4, the whole thing collapses. Now it's becoming accelerated because you got a bevy of organizations out there, 8 to 10 to be exact, that have now understood how important young talent is. So while you had 3 or 4 teams out there trying to go the super team route, well, you had 8 to 10 that went the genuine route, built their young team up. Now all these young teams are surging at the same time and have wiped out those veteran-laden stack-the-deck teams, win-now teams, player empowerment-driven teams right out the first round. And they did it fast, too. You didn't see no 7-game series. No. But I think the furthest it went was 6 games. Lakers went out in 5 games. Phoenix went out in 4 games. Clippers and Philly went out in 6 games. Along with Milwaukee. Now, Milwaukee could say, okay, we was missing Giannis because he suffered a calf strain before the end of the regular season. So you can sit there and say, okay, you can kind of see that. But then again, Milwaukee kind of faltered last year and lost, got upset in the first round. You need young talent. This is how important the draft is. Even if you win a championship, you may not repeat because it's really difficult to repeat as champion in any a professional sports league team sports wise. If you don't continuously draft, you're going to fall off. Showtime sustained for 10 years or a decade because they kept on drafting players. James Worthy, AC Green, Byron Scott, you know what I'm saying? Players like that to keep the run going. Even before Magic Johnson hit his like absolute prime in basketball. So what I'm trying to say is the whole model was flawed from get-go. It's not even real. You see, it devalued position basketball because if you got 3 franchise players, top 10 player, 2 top 5 players joining forces, well, you're going to say to yourself, man, do we need a point guard? Do we need a legitimate center running offense through? All we need is a rim protector. So because of the super team, think about it. Because of the super team, that's when the center position began to devolve. You didn't really have a dominant centers, like I'm talking about true bona fide centers when the super team era started. Then small ball was kind of introduced into the fold. You see what I'm saying? So what I'm getting at is now teams have wised up. They're going back to basics, but they're doing it in a way that applies to this decade. And I think it's genius. And that's the real reason why these super teams are struggling. It ain't because it ain't got nothing to do with the coach. It's because the model it wasn't even feasible to begin with, but the league didn't know how to respond to it. And plus, it triggered in a conference that was lackluster. You see what I'm saying? But as you can see, the Western Conference and just how strong and mighty and deep the conference has been for decades, you're not going to 8 straight finals in the West doing that. You're not going to do it. It's impossible because there's too many good teams out there in the West, especially that. That's why Kobe Bryant run after Shaq was traded, and he went back to back in 09, 010, led the Lakers to 3 straight finals in the West with the competition he had to face. But the West back then was 10 teams deep. Now it's 13. So the teams out there that went the shortcut route, they got a real dubious future ahead, man. I'm telling you. That's why I root for these teams that are doing it the right way, man. And I keep alluding to the fact that, being a fan of the Lakers, it was real discouraging to see them go down this route because you know how it's going to end up. It never ends well. Never. The only reason that the Lakers was able to, quote unquote, rebound from the collapse of 2022 is because they kept on mortgaging and borrowing against their future. It's not a build what they're doing. They're borrowing against their future to try to keep this win now scenario going, but it's an empty promise. It's not leading to anything. So I just want to share that real quick. The team building process was compromised, and what you would normally do to build a team up, it went backwards. It went from draft, trade, free agency to free agency, trade, and draft. And that's why those super teams fall off by year 4. Where a real championship run, it can last for 7 to 8 years. Where you're consistently in the mix. So I just want to drop that. Share your comments. And whether you agree or disagree, let us know. But just something that I had to, expound on. The super team era is done. Thank goodness. Until next time, this is JB for BTB, Behind the Bench.